Well, good morning, everybody. This is Billy Trout with the Tennessee Department of Revenue's Taxpayer and Education section. And on behalf of our Commissioner, David Geragano, and our staff in Taxpayer Services, we want to welcome you to today's webinar presentation on state tax compliance and the collections process. So today we have our hostess, Ms. Katie Julian, along with Scott Purvis from our collections and tax and what do we call you these days? Tax enforcement? We have a special word. I would say collections division.
Collection services is the proper term today.
Ah, yes, offering the services. There you go.
Exactly.
We're in the service business. So thanks to Scott and Katie for joining us. We want to call to your attention here the information that's on the slide that's in front of you as we're waiting for a few more people to join. You see the technical information on there too. We will have a copy of today's presentation recorded. Right now we're recording this and it'll be on our website most likely tomorrow afternoon. We do want to call to your attention also the ways that you can get information about the Department of Revenue that you see at the bottom of the slide as well too. This is probably a good time to mention that today's presentation, and I've put this in the chat area and hopefully you've been able to see that, we're here today to talk about complying with Tennessee state tax laws and how that relates to the collections process. We will not be talking about things like sales tax laws and business tax laws and franchise and excise tax laws and things like that. So if you're here for that reason, we thank you for coming and you're most welcome to stay, but we don't also want to take up a lot of your time because we are specifically only talking about the collections process and what that means with tax compliance at the state level. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Katie Julian, who will begin going through some information, and then we'll discuss a few issues that some of you have brought up and that we have thought up also after the presentation. So Katie, take it away. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Billy. And thanks to Scott for being here with us today. Excited to have you here. Thanks everybody for being here. Like Billy said, this is going to be a webinar that focuses in on mainly the collection process. What happens from that first day that a return is not received by us or there's a deficient payment. We're going to be focusing on that. I'm going to share with you, we'll go on a little field trip here towards the end of the presentation part where I can show you where some great resources are about, so you can get information about the specific tax types, because I know a lot of you in your registration forms had some specific questions about tax types, but like Billy said, no need to waste your time if you're here for that right now. We got great resources out there for that information. But today we're going to be talking about tax compliance and the collection process. We're going to talk about what happens when filing requirements are not met. There's accrual of penalty and interest starting with day one, and then we're going to detail the collection process, give you some other general compliance information, some tips and best practices, and then we're going to have a Q&A session and share some resources with you. At that point, we will turn the chat on so that you can chat with this panel and put your questions in there. We did receive a lot of great questions on your registration forms that we're also going to be discussing during that Q&A during the second half of today's program. So first off, before we get into the penalty and interest and collection process, I'm going to talk about, first off, know the filing deadlines for each tax type you are registered for. I know that might seem kind of like a duh moment, but a lot of times you might be using, a taxpayer may be using a third party to even set up their tax accounts and don't even realize what all they've got themselves registered for, right? It's real important if you're a small business to understand what tax types you have and what the filing deadlines are for each tax type. Now we have lots of different tax types. The main ones are business tax, sales tax, and franchise and excise tax. For business tax, pretty simple. That one's due on the 15th day of the 4th month following your fiscal year end. So if you've got a calendar year fiscal year end of December 31st, April 15th is going to be your due date. Sales tax, it's the 20th day of the month following a reporting period. F&E, same as business tax, the 15th day of the 4th month following your fiscal year end. And there is a opportunity to file an extension there with a valid extension that tax return and payment, or the tax return will be due on the 15th day of the 7th month following the original filing deadline. Payments still due on the original due date though. All other tax types, we've got tax pages that will detail all of this. If you go to our website, if you've got the PDF open that Billy mentioned and that we have a link to over in our chat, you can click directly on that link. It's a hyperlink that takes you over to all of our individual tax pages, which will have a due dates subpage for each one. Understand those. If you are a business owner, understand what each of those tax deadlines are. Mark them on your calendar, put a reminder in your phone. You don't want to miss them. No, none of us want to see you pay penalty or interest and get into this collection process. So also just want to mention it is very important that all taxpayers have master level 10 tap access to all tax accounts, and you check your account and the status and alerts often within 10 tap. That goes for even if you have someone handling all this for you, if you hire a CPA or an accountant to do all your tax stuff, we still want to recommend that taxpayers, business owners, have access to their 10 tap account. If nothing else, just to go in there and at a glance be able to see if everything's okay, right?
Katie, can I interrupt you just real quick? If
Yes,
you go
sir.
back to that other slide, I just
Okay.
wanted to point out something. So you're exactly right, and we thank everybody for knowing what their due date is too. But particularly on sales tax right here, where it says the 20th day of the month following the reporting period, one thing that we get tons of questions and emails about pretty much every day is I didn't have any sales and you guys say I owe all this money. Well, we're going to send you an assessment letter if you don't file that return for that period. When you register with us, we send you a registration certificate and it says that you have to file monthly or quarterly or annually or whatever your particular tax is, okay? And you do have to file. Okay, you can't just not file. All right. So when that door is cracked open, you have to jump through it and you have to tell us. So every month on 10 tap, even if you have no sales in sales tax, you have to file and say, hey, I don't have any sales. It's super easy. It takes you, I don't even know if it would take you 1 minute to do it. Probably not. But that's super critical. And I want to bring that up right now because we get this every single business day. We answer that question. We can
So
fix
true.
it and we can make it okay and tell you what to do. As far really, it's about filing returns. So it's pretty easy, but we can work with you on different other things, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. I just thought I'd bring it up now.
Such a good point. We can't impress that enough, too. So we might mention that several times today, Billy. And like you said, it's super simple. If you don't have any sales to report during a period, it doesn't even end up opening the return. It just asks you, do you have sales to report? And when you click no and submit, you're done. So it can literally take under 60 seconds to do that. Okay, so what happens if you miss a tax deadline? None of us, like I said, none of us want to see that happen, but if it happens, starting with day one, there's accrual of penalty and interest. Next, there is a letter that's called the Notice of Proposed Assessment, or NOPA. That'll go out about 30 days after there's a delinquent or deficient return. And then no response to that or no resolution to that, failure to respond to the NOPA will result in another letter called the final demand letter. It sounds kind of intense there, and it is. It's a pretty important thing. You don't want it to get to that point. At that point, there's a collection case created, all right? And you'll get a call from our collection services division, which Scott works for. And unfortunately, that can lead to if you don't resolve it at that point, once it gets into the collection services division, and it can lead to levy, possible levy and or lien. And we'll detail that for you here in just a few minutes. Okay, first we're going to talk about penalty and interest. What you're looking at here is a screenshot from the help article. I like to point this out because we like to point people towards revenue help on our website. When you go to tn.gov/revenue, you'll see a tile there that says revenue help. Articles about every aspect of Department of Revenue and taxes. Here is just some verbiage directly from the article about penalties and interest. So the penalty and interest applies to any deficient or delinquent payments. The penalty is 5% of the unpaid amount is added for each month. So that looks like days 1 through 30, it's a 5% penalty. Days 31 through 60, it's up to 10%, 61 to 90 days, 15%, 91 to 120 days, it's at 20%, and then it maxes out at 25%. That's the maximum penalty, is 25%. So anything over 120 days delinquent or deficient is going to be a 25% penalty. Interest, the current interest rate is 8%, and that's through June 30th. On June 30th of this of 2023, or of every year around June 30th, the commissioner will look at that again, and that might change. Our payment plan interest rate is currently 11%. Again, our interest rate is 8%. Payment plans, the interest rate, it is 11%, and that is through June 30th of 2023. Might go up, might go down at that point. There are a few different types of penalties. You've got delinquent or deficient tax payment. That means that the Tennessee Department of Revenue did not receive the return or payment, or did not receive sufficient payment for a filed return. And that does include franchise and excise tax estimated payments. There's also a penalty that is for insufficient funds. This can possibly be due to incorrect banking info that we have, okay? If you change banks and if you previously had a bank account set up in TNTAP to make filing and paying easier, but you change that bank and don't let TNTAP know, it's going to keep wanting to get the money from the account that it has on file, right? And that's what we see a lot of insufficient funds come for. It's not always that you don't have enough money, it's that there's not enough money in the account that you're attempting to use for your payments. We'll talk about waiving penalties here in a minute, but just so you know, the insufficient funds penalty is one that unfortunately cannot be waived. So always make sure that your banking information is correct in TNTAP for sure. There's also something called a negligence penalty, and that happens when there's an audit finding. All right, waiving penalty and interest, another revenue help article we have here. We are authorized to waive penalties in some cases if there's reasonable cause, but there is no provision in the law to waive interest. We can waive penalties, cannot waive interest for any reason. To request a waiver of penalty, it's very easy on TNTAP. You log into TNTAP, select additional actions next to the account that you're wanting to waive a penalty for, click petition for penalty waiver, and then complete a few steps there. Very easy. Now, I will tell you, it's not common if you've requested a penalty waiver. It's not always common that we will approve multiple penalty waiver requests. Can't make any promises there, but if you have a good filing history and have a penalty on there, don't be afraid to go in there and just ask for a waiver for that penalty. All right, so I mentioned the NOPA, Notice of Proposed Assessment. This is a letter you will get in the mail after 30 days of with a past due balance on the account or a return not being filed and an estimated return generated, or if an audit is complete. The letter, you see just a snippet of it here. We're going to dive into what that letter says here in the next few slides, but the main reason that you'll get a NOPA is that a return wasn't filed and that estimated amount is due. A common thing we see with this is you think it's just a bill. You'll look and just pay the amount there. You can zoom in, and on the next few screens, like I said, we'll have bigger version of this letter. But if you click the little plus sign on your screen above the slide, you can kind of zoom in. But you see it says estimated bill summary and balance due. That is just an estimate. There are action items that we're going to discuss here to take. If it says estimate, that means you need to file a return because there's a good chance that that estimate is way bigger than what you're going to really owe once you file the return. So this is not a bill. This is saying, hey, you need to file a return. So the NOPA details. Up in the top right corner of any letter you receive from the Department of Revenue, you're going to see a letter ID, an account ID, an account type, and a filing period. If you have delinquencies in multiple accounts, you'll get multiple letters. Each NOPA is for one account type only, so it's important to pay attention to that. What do you need to do immediately? If it's an estimated NOPA, estimated return NOPA, then you need to file the return ASAP. You see here, it says our records indicate that you have not filed a return for the above filing period. How do you file? On TINTAP, electronic filing is required. And what if I fail to act now? If we do not receive a return from you, the estimated bill summary will be sent to collections for further action. Again, that is not what we want to happen. If you get this letter, call us. If you have questions about it, sometimes it could be that you have a duplicate account. If you think I've already filed this return, what are they talking about? Still, don't just ignore it. You may want to reach out to us. We could have a duplicate account for you where the other one got set up in error, maybe at the clerk's office when you went to get your license. Yes, Billy, I see you popping in here.
I know I'm annoying today. Well, I'm
No, you're
annoying every
not.
day, but that's another story. Anyway, what you just said has so much wisdom and something that people just don't understand a lot. When you get these assessments on these letters, okay, we do not want you to pay them. We want you to file your return and to pay what is owed. That's all. Okay. If you're late, okay, there's penalty and interest, like Katie says. And Scott may have a comment here too, as well. But the main thing we want you to do is to comply with what the law says. Because this assessment, sure, you can pay it if you want to, but it's probably in almost every case more than what you really owe. And we don't want you to do that. Scott, do you have anything you want to add on that as well?
Yeah, those are great points, Billy and Katie. I do want to make one point additionally is that these NOPAs are period specific. So in the case of sales tax, you may have a January period, a February period, a March period, and you're getting a notice of proposed assessment for each period. And you're thinking, wait, why am I getting this again? I just got one of these yesterday. Because it's period specific, it may occur multiple times for those periods. And what Billy said is just so true. The biggest mistake that you can make is the head and sand approach, where you say, well, I'm just not going to do anything. I don't know what to do. I'm frustrated. I've got 3 of these notices. I don't know what to do. The first course of action should be log into your TINTAP account, see what's going on, see what periods may be missing a return, and file that return accordingly.
Oh, that's so true. Believe it or not, from the government people today, what we're telling you is we don't want extra money. We really don't. We want the right amount of money on time. That's it. Honest to goodness. Really. Okay. And now I'm going to be quiet, Katie. Thank you very much.
Thanks, y'all. Yeah, we're gonna impress this upon you multiple times too, because we see it so often that it just gets ignored, or that maybe you never even got this letter because you moved and forgot to give us your new address. That's an even more unfortunate situation because you don't know anything's even wrong until there's a garnishment. So lots of important stuff here. Just don't ignore this letter and make sure that you do have your address with us kept up to date so you receive this letter if there is some kind of discrepancy, and have a TINTAP account, a master TINTAP account. All business owners have your own TINTAP account, and log in there, make sure everything's looking right. All right, on the page 2 of the NOPA, there are lots more details here, and this is where you may want to click the zoom in button on your screen. It's going to break down, why did I receive this notice? What should I do next? What if I disagree with this assessment? And how long do I have to respond to this? So we're going to look at each one of these for just a minute here. Why did I receive this notice? You received it for one of the following reasons. And you'll know also if it's because of an estimate, if it's because you did not file a return and we have created an estimated amount due, it'll say that on the front as well, or on page 1. It could be that you filed a return but did not pay all of the tax due. Let's see, what should I do next? If you received this notice before because you did not file a required tax return, go file it. Simple as that. Go file the return. If you received this notice because you underpaid, because there was a deficiency in the amount paid for a return, go in and pay it. Or if you can't, you can set up a payment plan. And we're going to talk about payment plans here in a little while. If you feel like you did file a return and paid it in full, You check it on TinTap. This is just not adding up. What you're seeing in this letter is not adding up to what you feel like happened, so you're disagreeing with it. That's a good time to reach out to us. You can call us or you can submit a request online in Revenue Help on the Revenue Help page. Send us an email. It's time to figure out, again, don't just ignore it. If you're like, oh, I already did this. Could be that the letter and when you did it crossed in the mail. Cool. That's a simple. We are actually really easy to get in touch with unless it's a tax deadline day like April 15th. But you can get right on the phone with some help. If you get this letter and you feel like you already filed it, call us. We'll get to the bottom of it pretty quickly. There could be an issue like duplicate accounts, like I mentioned. So there's also, let me make sure to touch on this. It's very important. You have 30 days to respond to either go and file the return, pay the deficient amount, get to the bottom of it, call us, do all that. 30 days to resolve this before you will get this next letter, that final notice letter I mentioned, and there's a collection case created. You still have time to take care of things after you get that final notice, but the clock's really ticking once you get this letter, all right? There's also something called an informal conference if you disagree with an assessment. We're going to talk about that here in the next couple slides. A taxpayer who has received a NOPA may request an informal conference within 30 days of receiving the NOPA. At the informal conference, the taxpayer can explain to a hearing officer why he or she thinks the proposed assessment is incorrect. Now, this is not always needed. If you disagree with an assessment, the first thing to do is to reach out to taxpayer services or call us, email us. There could be a very reasonable reason why, like I said, maybe a duplicate account, something of that sort. But maybe you closed this business and thought you closed the tax account, but it didn't, something happened and the tax account didn't get closed. That we see that happen a lot. You go into your county clerk's office to tell them you closed your business, but you didn't tell the Department of Revenue. We communicate about a lot of things, but not that. You actually have to close your accounts directly through the Department of Revenue, all tax accounts, if you close your business, and we'll give you some information that can help you with that as well. But if that's the case, again, you don't need an informal conference, just call us. We'll help you walk through that. We can backdate the closure date, do a lot of things to help you there. There's some details involved that could get complicated, but it's not too bad. It's really not if that's the case. If you close your business, we'll help you over the phone. No need for an informal conference. There is a website you can go to request an informal conference. It walks you through a series of questions that asks you that will let you know if you actually need an informal conference or if you just need to call us to work through a situation where it can be resolved that way. There is a number here if you've got questions about the informal conference process, and we also have a whole section in our revenue help area that is about informal conferences. In that blue box on the bottom here, if you've got the PDF open, you can click on that link. That hyperlink will take you over to lots of revenue help articles about informal conferences. Just to recap the NOPA here, do not ignore this letter because action of some sort is required. If a return has been filed but there's a balance due, you can pay on TinTap. If there's a missing return, so if you believe you filed that return, reach out to us. If you've not filed, go in and file and pay on TinTap. If you're receiving the NOPA because an audit has been completed, you can go in and pay that on TinTap. And you have 30 days to resolve this issue before a final assessment letter is sent and the collection process starts. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the final demand letter. We'll zoom in on it here in the next slide. But failure to resolve the issue in the NOPA will result in the issuance of a final demand letter and a collections case being created. Do want to make note here, you'll see this letter here. The letter is going to contain the account and tax liability info that was included in the NOPA plus a collections case number. Now, like Scott said, if you have multiple periods that have delinquencies and multiple tax accounts, you're going to get multiple letters, but they're going to look very similar at first glance. But if you look up in that right-hand corner, you'll see that there's a difference on each one. There's a case per period per tax account. If you receive this letter by mail, you'll see a payment coupon with the mailed letter. But if you get this correspondence via your TinTap account, you won't see that payment coupon. There'll just be a link to go pay it that way directly in TinTap. All right, some more details about the final demand letter here. The most important thing I want to tell you here is that you'll see here, I've got it underlined. It's a little bit blurry, but if you zoom in, failure to respond or render payment within 10 days of the receipt of this notice may result in collection action, including the levy and seizure of the taxpayer's real or tangible property, bank accounts, monies, and accounts receivables. If the taxpayer operates as a business, failure to respond or render payment within 10 days of the receipt of this notice could result in the business being seized, closed, getting padlocked, something we really don't want to see happen. So if you haven't already taken care of it with the NOPA and then you get this letter, it's really time. It is big time to take care of this issue. You're going to see in the final demand letter on page 2 of the final demand letter, it's the snip that's in the middle of this page here. It's going to tell you the period, the amount, penalty, and interest. You'll see the last column there beside balance, it says return filed, where it says no there. Again, we're just reminding you, you've got to go in and file this return so that we know what you really owe. If you don't, the amount of the estimated return is what's in collections. So the collection case has been created once you've gotten that final demand letter. Ooh, this is not fun stuff here, but it's reality of what happens sometimes, right, Scott? The Tennessee Department of Revenue collection officers will make every attempt to contact the taxpayer and resolve the issue. That is what they do. They want to help you resolve this. It can be an intimidating phone call to get, especially if you feel like you've already paid. At that point, again, let them help you. We really want to resolve this issue at this point. We don't want it to get to the next level, which is levy and lien. If contact is not made, we will, like I said, attempt to contact the taxpayer in every way possible. Use every contact we've got in our system. We will research as much as we can to get in touch with you because we really want to resolve it. But if contact is not made, or if contact is made but the tax liability is still not resolved, the next step is levy and lien. And again, can't impress upon you enough to keep your contact info with us updated. Check TinTap periodically so you don't miss important info from us. Yes, Scott.
One point to make on that, Katie, is the opposite is true from the final demand for the NOPA, whereas the NOPA is period specific. The final demand can contain multiple periods that the system generated. Any period that's due can be included on that final demand. And that's the
Gotcha.
first step. First step in the collection officer's process is to send out that final demand as a recap, if you would. Hey, here's all the periods that we show they're unresolved and we show a liability for.
That's
so
right. So that's what you'll
knows.
see in that the middle section I have here.
Right.
That will list any periods that are within that. Okay, thank you for clearing that up
Sure thing.
for us. So after 10 days of no response, like the final demand letter says, then the collections officer unfortunately would issue an intent to levy or lien letter. So we do not have to go through, the state of Tennessee does not have to go through the courts to issue a levy or lien. This letter will get issued to you after unsuccessful attempts by a collection officer to reach the taxpayer, and or if the taxpayer fails to resolve the tax liability. It's going to contain specific data by which levy and lien action will commence. I'm sorry, a specific date by which levy and lien action will commence. It will let you know, hey, by such and such date, we're going to proceed with levy and lien action. Again, if you receive this letter by mail, there will be a payment coupon that accompanies the notice. So what does levy and lien look like? For levy, it can be a wage levy, a wage garnishment if you are 1099 employee also. Bank levy, we can levy your bank account. Merchant processor, if you process credit cards, we can levy those funds. Property seizure, as we mentioned, not good stuff, not fun stuff here. Property lien, a lien can be placed on any property that is owned by the business or taxpayer. You see there, this is the TCA 67-1-1405. that actually authorizes collection by levy. So who is liable when we get to this point? Of, maybe this is a business that you inherited. You bought a business from someone else. Personal responsibility. So if you've got a sole proprietorship, you are responsible for the all tax liabilities. If you are an LLC, then stakeholders can be responsible for trust taxes, which are collected from customers and then held in trust for the state until they are remitted. So sales tax, liquor by the drink tax. When a responsible party fails to ensure that these taxes are remitted, then we may pursue that person individual for the liability again. So if you're an LLC, that will provide you some protection, but not if there is a tax liability on trust taxes. Then the stakeholders for that LLC are possibly going to be held personally liable. Successor liability, the purchaser of a business or stock of goods must withhold a sufficient amount of the purchase price to cover the seller's unpaid taxes unless the seller gives the purchaser a receipt from the department showing that taxes due have been paid. This is a certificate of good standing. If you are going to purchase a business from someone, make sure you get that certificate of good standing from the Department of Revenue. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Katie, if I could add here, in addition to the notices the business will receive, I think it's worth mentioning to the audience that if there is a personal responsibility or a personal liability, as we call it, a personal liability assessment will be sent specifically to that person to the best address we have on record. The same with the successor. It's a specific notice that says, hey, we've identified you as the successor for a purchased business. Here's the periods we show. So again, just want to make sure everyone understands it's not a surprise tactic. We do make every attempt to make the personal liability assessment person know, hey, we're assessing you because the business has failed to respond to this.
Great. Thanks for mentioning that, Scott. So what that
And
looks like.
Hey,
Sorry.
I'll jump in. I'll jump in here too, real quick too. So if you were to buy somebody's business, and you may have mentioned this, Katie. I'm sorry, had something else going on, but the tax clearance letter that you can receive, if you're the selling business, you need to get a tax clearance letter from the Department of Revenue, so that when you sit down across the table from the people that are buying your business, you can slide this letter across the table to them and say, hey, I have cleared every tax with the Department of Revenue. You will not be responsible for anything else because I've cleared it all up. And if you're the purchasing business, in other words, you're buying that business, you need to demand that the seller get you this clearance letter. It's super important, absolutely critical. Okay.
Absolutely. And Billy, if I could add, the reason that's
Mhm.
impactful is because if I'm selling my business to Billy and Billy calls the Department of Revenue and says, hey, has Scott paid all his taxes? The Department of Revenue can't tell him that. That's
Nope.
disclosure that would be unlawful. So the seller is the one that has the responsibility to get that letter, because as a buyer, you simply can't get it.
That's exactly right. Couldn't have said it any better.
Right. Just to clarify and show you what it would look like, what Scott was talking about with personal liability, if you have a business and it's an LLC and you get a NOPA and then a final demand, ignore those, don't take care of it. If it's a trust tax, so sales tax, liquor by the drink, tire tax, that is in delinquency, at that point, a new case is going to get created for the stakeholders. And that's what he was talking about. That creates a personal liability case. So definitely you want to take care of it at that point if you haven't already. All right, we're going to talk about payment plans. Here's another screenshot from one of our revenue help articles. There's a whole section on payment plans. This is just one of the articles about payment plans, but it's how to request a payment plan. So if you have outstanding tax liabilities owed to the Department of Revenue resulting from an audit or tax liability from filed returns, you can set up a payment plan. Only the 10-tap master account holder can request a payment plan. It can't be requested by a third party. It's important to note here too that all returns must be filed in order to request a payment plan. So if you've got any estimated returns out there, If you've got any periods that you have not filed for, before you can request a payment plan, you have to file those returns so we know what you actually owe. Very important, the third red bullet point here in the notes, if the subsequent return is delinquent, that payment plan is revoked. If you are on a payment plan and then you miss another tax deadline, that payment plan gets revoked. So very important, if you get on a payment plan, stay in compliance with all of your subsequent tax deadlines. It's very easy if you are the master TINTAP account holder to request a payment plan. Again, if all the returns are filed, you log into TINTAP, click on the More tab, and then click on Request a Payment Plan. Like I said, more help articles in Revenue Help about this process. Again, the interest rate for payment plans is 11%. For you, you may want to get a personal loan for your business to take care of it, but this is an option for you. Okay, just to recap here, tax compliance basics, penalty and interest start accruing the day a return or payment is late. Penalty may be waived upon request. Interest cannot be waived. There are different types of penalties. That NOPA letter, we also call it a nudging letter, may be an estimated amount. Lets the taxpayer know that they must comply within 30 days, resolve the issue within 30 days, or a collection case is created and you're going to get that final demand letter. You have 10 days to comply with that letter to get everything, get the ship righted, or a collection or levy and lien action may ensue at that point. Collection cases, the Tennessee Department of Revenue collection officers will attempt contact, and again, with no resolution to the issue, an intent to levy and lien letter is sent, and then after that, levy and lien action. All right, I'm going to take a quick field trip. At this point, I'm going to open up the chat while I'm going to take you over to our website to show you a few resources. Give me just a minute to open up the chat so that you can, let's see, we're going to open it up so that you can put your questions to the panelists in the chat. Let's see here. All right, that's open now. And I'm going to leave the PowerPoint for just a minute and take you over to our website. Okay, here is the homepage of tn.gov/revenue. Make it bigger on my screen here. A few places I want to show you here. The individual tax pages. If you've got questions about an individual tax, what's the due date for business tax? What are some questions? If you have questions about what qualifies for what do you need to charge sales tax on, or need some questions answered about single article sales tax, all that, you can get that information by clicking on this taxes. There's a tile for it, and you can also click on it in the upper thing bar. Taxes, then you click on the tax type, and once you click on the tax type, you will see lots of information here. It looks a little bit different if you're on a mobile device, but there is a heading where you can go to subheadings at that point for due dates and tax rates, registration and licensing, classification, so on and so forth. Tax guidance. There is a tax manual for most of our tax types. Tax manual. I'm going to click on this. There are a few different ways you can get here, but just want to show you what it looks like. Then I'm going to click on the business tax manual. Very exhaustive resource here on each of our tax types. Again, this is just our business tax one. We got a great sales tax manual, all the alcohol taxes, franchise excise. Most questions you would have about tax compliance when it comes to the individual tax types you can find in the manual. Also, go back to the top here, back over to Revenue's homepage. If you can't find it in the manual or want to type in a keyword in Revenue Help from our homepage, here is Revenue Help. Lots of information about TINTAP here. Each of these subheadings has lots of other great information, like I'm just clicking on tax returns, for example, and there's 13 articles specifically about filing your tax return in TINTAP. Taxes, there is a page for each of our taxes, and then some other information about taxes as well there for you. And collection services has a section in our Revenue Help questions specifically about liens, final demand letters, payment plans, offer and compromise, responsible parties, lots of information under each of these headings here. While I'm over here, and before we go back over to the PowerPoint and start getting to your questions, just really quick, I want to show you, because we get questions about this every month for our tax webinar. For a recording of this webinar, where you're going to go from our homepage, scroll down to Taxpayer Education and Outreach, and then the tax webinars page. This is where you registered for today's webinar. If you scroll down, of course, this is where the PDF was or is. Scroll down to the bottom, you'll see a webinar video library. This is also, if you've got specific questions about certain tax types, we've done a lot of webinars at this point. 46 looks like 46 webinars. We started doing these a couple years ago. We may have a webinar that's specific to the situation that you have, a question that you have. We've got that tax manual, we've got the revenue help page, and we've got a lot of webinars. One other thing to show you from the Taxpayer Education and Outreach page is our new business workshop. Every quarter we have a live new business workshop virtually, but if you are a new business, from some of the questions that came in on the registration forms, I got the feeling that we have a lot of new businesses on here. If you were not at the new business workshop that we offered earlier this month, we're going to have another one on July 12th. You can register for it. You can also watch the video of the most recent new business workshop that we had. You see it right here. So I am going to now go back over. Scott, Billy, is there anything else on our website before I leave? I can always come back to it, but is there anything else that you want to point out for them on Revenue's homepage?
The main thing there, if you look in that thing that just changed the picture, if you're looking for, like late breaking tax info, this is where we put that on the little changing slide there. You can see different things that we're promoting at different times. But just being able to find that 10-tap link and being able to get into your account. And several people in chat have already put some information in, and I've thrown it out there for the group about 10-tap issues relating to 10-tap access. How do they get access? What do I see when I get there to 10-tap? The main thing is to get that master account level access, like you said, Katie. For every taxpayer needs that. It's kind of like having online banking. I think most of us use online banking services now to go out there and see, did a bill clear, or do I need to make a payment to somebody or something like that. So many things have gone to electronic, and taxes are no different than that. So when you go to 10-tap, you will see anything that's missing. If you don't have access to your particular account, let us know. Call us. Katie's going to refresh the phone number and email address. There we go. See, told you she'd do it.
Magic.
But just like magic and just like that, right? So yeah, call us or send us an email. Send us, for if it's 10-tap related, revenue.support@tn.gov. If it's a collections issue, like I think Scott would back me up on that, use that collections email address, but don't send collections stuff about 10-tap. Our taxpayer services people can help you about how to get access to 10-tap, how to explain things like that. But if you're talking about liens, levies, payment plans, stuff like that, that's revenue.collection@tn.gov. Would you agree with that, Scott?
I would, and great points, both from you and Katie, is that the 10-tap needs to be the route where you go to search for help. And if not, I think it's important to note that sometimes we will find a taxpayer that has included in their 10-tap account, let's say they have two tax types, franchise and excess and sales tax, but their access is only for sales tax. So franchise and excise may be sitting out there not available for their 10-tap account because they hadn't requested master level. So they don't even know about, they're getting a notice of franchise and excise. They're logging into 10-tap going, I don't see that. I don't see that. Make sure that you have all tax types included in your 10-tap request.
That's a great point, Scott, because a lot of times, especially for franchise and excise specifically, businesses will have an accountant do that. That was a little more complicated of a tax, and third party a lot of times will e-file that or will take care of that tax for a business. And so the business owner with their master access doesn't even see it on there. So gaining access to your tax accounts is very, to all tax accounts is critical. Scott, a question that we've got here, what about tax liens? If I had a tax lien but took care of my liability, is that lien automatically removed? How does that work, Scott?
It is an automatic process so that our system tracks your balance due. And when your balance due reaches zero on a tax lien account, then a release letter is generated for the county where the lien is recorded. So while it is automatic, it is a manual letter that goes. It's not electronic notification to the county. It is a manual release letter that's generated. The good news is it's generated automatically, not waiting for someone to go hit a button to make that happen. So yes, that's a relatively fast process, depending on the county. If they have some type of work shortage, it may cause a little bit of delay for the county, but we do send those as soon as the account is zeroed out.
Okay, that's good to know. And I think, sometimes someone doesn't realize that there's even an issue. Maybe they've moved enough times, never got in touch. We never got in touch with you. They don't realize that there is a lien or a liability until they get to a real estate closing, right?
Right.
They're like, whoa, I don't want to hold this up. I'm going to go file those tags. I'm going to file that return,
Exactly.
take care of this. And if it all needs to happen in one day, I know reaching out to the collection services division is something that you can do at that point if you're in a rush, if you're at a closing table and realize there's a state tax lien.
The other thing I wanted to maybe bring up here for just a second, let Scott comment on it a little bit, is levies. So if there's a wage levy or a bank levy or something like that, what I've always been told is under state law, the banks and the employers are required to comply with this. And if they don't, they get in big trouble. So you want to talk about that for a second, Scott?
Absolutely. Thanks, Billy. What will happen is we issue a wage levy to an employer, and the employer chooses not to serve that levy and withhold the necessary wages. Then we can do what's called a failure to honor levy, and we actually create a collection case against the business. The same would be true of a bank or financial institution where we do a bank levy and the bank refuses to honor it for whatever reason. We run into it more with wage levies than bank levies. But there are ramifications against those businesses that choose not to participate or honor the wage levy that we've served. It's not optional.
And I've talked to taxpayers too, Scott, that have said, "Hey, there was $100 charge on my account at my bank. What's that about?" Well, what that is some of the financial institutions charge a big fee for honoring levies, state levies, federal levies, to IRS or whoever too. Now, that's something you'd have to talk about with your financial institution. We don't get that money. We only get what they send us. Okay.
Correct.
So,
And that fee can vary from financial institution to financial institution. Credit unions, since they're not for profit, have a little different fee structure, but again, not something that the department controls. The bank is the one that's assessing you that fee, and they're the ones that are collecting that money, not giving it to DOR.
and I'll tell you, folks, in working with the state and also the federal government for a number of years too, and seeing different situations that taxpayers get themselves involved with, let me just encourage you again to be proactive. Like Katie has mentioned numbers of times about being on 10 tap, and Scott mentioned, about the different nuances of collection, but this whole thing is very expensive. So the whole way to avoid everything we're talking about here today is to file your taxes on time and to remit the payment. Now, also, if you don't have enough money, we talked about the payment plan. Someone in chat mentioned accurately, about the interest fee being very high. It is high. Okay. It's high under state law because that's the way it's supposed to be. The state is in the business of collecting tax. We're not really wanting to do too much collections activities. No offense to Scott and his folks. They're great people, but the best thing you could do is to make him not work.
That's right.
File and pay on time and save yourself money, even if you are paying credit card interest or you're, having to pay somebody back or something like that. You're way better off, way
Great
better
point.
off. And super critical. And Katie, you may have mentioned this, and I apologize if I'm stepping on something you mentioned, but if you can't pay it, at least file it. Okay. Because that's going to get the NOPA thing gone. And then all we're talking about is money. All right. And Scott and his folks can help you on payments, or you can, track that down later on or whatever. But, Scott mentioned the head in the sand thing. Oh my goodness, y'all. I couldn't say it any stronger. Do not ignore letters that come from not only our agency, but any state agency, federal agency. Somebody sent you that letter for a reason. Okay. Even if it's wrong, call us. You see our information here. Send us an email and reach out to us and let us hold your hand while we solve this issue. Okay. Super important to address stuff as it comes up because it will snowball in a heartbeat faster than you could ever imagine.
And I
Okay.
saw several questions in the chat, Billy, that dealt with what happens if the department collects too much money. In other words, if someone filed a return that was estimated and then they go back and file the return, what happens to the money? Well, absolutely. All we are looking for is the money that was due to the state of Tennessee Department of Revenue. So any overage that's collected through a wage levy, a bank levy, an estimated return, that money will be refunded to the taxpayer. It may take a process of going in and asking for the refund on what we call a claim for refund. Again, TNTAP is your tool. You can go to the portal and request a refund for anything that was over collected, for the lack of a better word.
Right. And the way you do that real quick is you go into TNTAP, you sign in, and you look at the tax type. And if you see something in green, that means it's a credit. Okay. So then you can go and click on additional actions and then claim for refund. Complete the information and submit it. And we'll tell you it does take a few weeks because there's a lot of people that request refunds, and there's a very precise process we have to go through on those. But we're happy to give you your money back. I mean, we don't want to hold your money. Now, sometimes people will say, okay, it's a small amount. I'll just leave it on there and it'll go towards my taxes for next year. That's fine. You're welcome to do that. We're okay with that. But it's your choice. It's your money. Okay. But we do want you to do what you want to do. Okay.
And that green credit won't transfer from one tax type to another tax type. So it may take a phone call or email to taxpayer services for assistance in that, because we don't want to move money from one tax type to another if it wasn't intended for that.
Right, right. And we do need that normally in writing. It's best to send that to revenue.support@tn.gov because we need that official request from you as the taxpayer to do that. And we will do it. It doesn't take very long to do. It's very easy to do. So we're glad to do that for you too.
That is a good point. It's not an automatic process, though. If you get on the TNTAP and you say, oh, I'm a little bit in the red for my sales tax account, but I've got a big credit on business tax account, that should just, I should be good to go. Not the case. Like Scott said, it's account specific. So definitely need to let us know in writing if you want it moved.
I'm going to tag on to the whole idea of TNTAP and refunds and stuff and mention the penalty waiver process as well. Penalty waivers can be applied for and should be applied for on TNTAP also. And you find those in the same area where you find the claim for refunds under the additional actions and that. So a lot of times we'll get emails and phone calls from taxpayers saying, I want you to waive my penalty because of X, Y, Z, whatever. And that's fine, except we can't do it. We need your actual request, and the way to do it is on TNTAP because it electronically sends that to the unit that handles penalty waivers. And that's what you want to do is you want to get that to us ASAP so that we can work on your waiver request very quickly. And Katie, you're pulling up some information right now, aren't you?
Just showing them there's an article in Revenue Help about requesting a penalty waiver. Here's the exact steps right there. It's very simple.
Yeah, we want you to do that, especially if you've this is your first time, you just started a new business, you kind of didn't know what was going on. That's okay. Most of the time we can work with you on stuff like that. Okay. People who sort of almost always are late and that sort of thing are usually not very successful about getting their penalty waived. Okay. Because after a while, you should kind of know when your return is due and should be paid and all that. Okay. So that's kind of the philosophy on that. But yes, we work with penalty waivers and refunds on a daily basis. I promise you, every working day, somebody is working penalty waivers and refunds.
Hey, we've gotten some questions on the registration forms and in chat about unemployment tax and property taxes. Just to be clear, the taxes that the Department of Revenue handles are business tax, sales tax, franchise excise, your alcohol taxes, some others, specifically unemployment insurance, payroll tax, basically, and tangible personal property tax. Those are handled by other agencies.
Mhm.
That's sometimes an area of confusion, kind of work in
Unem-
some silos, but
Right. Just to let you know, unemployment tax is handled by the Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce Development. So that's what you want to do is you want to go out there and address questions with them on that. Property taxes, if it's regarding a property assessment, then you need to talk to the property assessor in your county or your city, what you're talking about, maybe both, if you're in both. And also, if it's about the payment of a property tax, that goes to your trustee locally. So that's who you need to contact. Okay.
so we are coming up at the end of the hour here. Lots of questions that you've submitted to us. If we were not able to get to your question, if it is tax specific related, again, email us at revenue.support@tn.gov or call our tax call center at 615-253-0600. If it's collection services related, if it's about a final demand, levies, liens, payment plans, you can email those questions to revenue.collection@tn.gov or call our collection services division at 615-741-7071. But again, lots of great information and revenue help that may answer your questions there or in the tax manuals. Scott, Billy, do y'all have anything to add as we're wrapping things up?
One question I saw that thought we could reference real quick is someone asked, could they change their filing frequency? Sales tax filing frequency is determined by the amount of money you collect in sales tax. So it's driven by the amount. So you wouldn't want to have an annual filed sales tax return when you collect the amount that should be reported quarterly. So the reason for those quarterly, monthly, annual returns is based on the amount of tax that's collected by the business.
Right. And if you have questions about that, make sure you email or call us so we can discuss it with you. There are ways to make adjustments in certain situations, but what Scott said is not incorrect. It's actually right. Very, very true. Most taxpayers file monthly on sales tax. And I can't think of anything else besides all the other questions we couldn't get to. But yeah, we look forward to getting your email or your call on those. And we're super happy to help you out.
Yeah, we had over 1,000 people in here, so lots of questions. Email us, call us, follow us on social media if you're there. It's a great way to stay in the loop about what's going on. We even put reminders about tax deadlines out on social media, so good thing to do there. As you're leaving, well, before I mention this, Scott, thank you for being here with us
Absolutely.
today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Sure, yes, you're a pleasure to have as our special guest, and Billy, thanks to you, I guess.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Kidding.
Thank you. Thank you, Katie.
As you're leaving us, please take just a brief second to complete the survey. Just a couple questions there, but this is very important. If you are here and want to receive CPE credit, you have to answer yes to question 4 on this post-event survey that you're going to get that pops up as soon as we leave here. So hope you join us next month for our monthly tax webinar. Oh my gosh, what is next month, Billy? I don't even have it
Is
in my
this nonprofits?
Yes, that's right. It is tax considerations for nonprofit and charitable organizations. As always, it's the last Tuesday of every month. We have a free tax webinar. Join us, and again, you can find this presentation on our website tomorrow in the webinar video archive. So, hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, y'all. Have a great day.